Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Business Brew. I'm your host, Bill Brewster. I am super amped to be joined by Ian Cassel today. For those that know me from the Value After Hours podcast with Tobias Carlisle and Jake Taylor, Ian is all 10 of our fans. We only have 10. They're all bots that Ian pays for, and I appreciate all of his support. That's an inside joke, but it's also a little true. Anyway, we'll dive into that as we go. Ian is a very cool investor. He is an investor and entrepreneur. He is the man behind MicroCapClub. He wrote 2 books on the Intelligent Fanatics concept, and he runs his own Microcap strategy, I believe in a fund structure, right, Ian?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to dive into that. As always, none of this is investing advice. I'm not your fiduciary. Ian's not your fiduciary. Your money is your money. Be responsible with it. Do your own due diligence. So with that out of the way, Ian, what's going on, man?
I'm just honored to be on here. I'm a big fan of you and what you guys were doing with Toby and Jake, and just seeing you doing your own thing is pretty wild. It's pretty great, too, because I think you're a special talent. So, I'm embarrassed to say that, just for the listeners, too, I mean, this is the first time we've talked.
I know, this is the legit introduction right here.
Yeah, which is kind of ridiculous because we've messaged quite a bit back and forth on Twitter and through email, but I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Dude, what's funny is I feel like I know you. And if you had told my 17-year-old self, like, you're going to make friends or feel connections to people on the internet, I'd be like, no, you're a nerd. But that's 100% what my life has become. It's wild.
Well, and the people you can connect with, just the breadth of those folks in different areas, it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, it really is. And I think we were talking about it shortly before we came on, but Toby giving me a shot was, I remember when he put me on his first podcast, and it was like Jim O'Shaughnessy dropped. And I wrote him, and I was like, Toby, you don't have to feature me. I'm no one. This is Jim O'Shaughnessy. What are you doing? And he really encouraged me to come on, and he's like believed in me. It's been super fun, and I'm glad that I've said it before. I'm glad that I could reciprocate to him in some way because it's been a very fun journey.
No, Toby's an amazing talent. I think a lot of people look at him and they just think, oh, here's just a deep value dude, and just to tell him about, how the market's always too high. But I mean, he is so well versed across almost every aspect of investing, and I like how he does his interviews too. When I was on his podcast before, I think a lot of times he knows more about the subject matter than the person he has on. Like, he's done that type of research beforehand.
Yeah.
So, my hat's off to him on how he conducts himself, how he does his business, and just how he prepares. And it shows in the quality of what he produces, whether it's the podcast, books, or whatever he does. So I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, he's. I think not enough people realize that the reason that he's doing what he's doing is he tried to do a lot of the other stuff and determined this is the best solution for me, right? And I think that some people that maybe are just starting to follow him are like, oh, this is just some deep value guy. But it's like, no, he's thought about a lot of the stuff that you're thinking about. He just sort of is probably further along in the process, and maybe he'll end up where he is eventually. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people are just. He's tried different things, and just like you're trying this and you're successful at it, but you can't be afraid to go out and try new things, especially when you're beginning. I mean, that's how you figure out who you are. You don't know what will work the next time until you fail at something.
So how'd you figure out who you were?
It's a good question.
I mean, for people that don't know your background, sort of where'd you start? And I mentioned that you're Microcap. For those that don't know, I mean, how would you define what you're looking at?
I define Microcap as sub 300 million market cap. And, I got started in investing when I was 16, 17 years old, when I was in high school. And my parents ran a small business. And actually, my grandfather started that small business. When I say small, I'm talking, it was my grandfather and my dad working at it. It's like 2 or 3 man shop.
What kind of business?
And, it was kind of basically graphic design, graphic arts, kind of truck lettering back. I mean, my grandfather started it in 1945, and my dad took it over in the early 80s. And sort of the expectation was for me to take that over. And, growing up in that business, I was always there because my dad was always working, and it was always just a chore. It wasn't anything that I felt like I'd love to do.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest conversations I ever had was when I was 15, and I had to, and I realized I do not want to be in this business anymore. But how do you tell your dad, somebody, we had a good relationship, somebody you admire, that, hey, this isn't for you, as a 15-year-old, it's just a lot of stress built up. But
well,
that was,
especially too, a business has been around since the 40s, right? It's like, I kind of don't want to carry on the family legacy. That's not the easiest thing to say.
yeah, and that was the stress point. And I got lucky because my sister married well, and my brother-in-law is now taking over the business. But back then, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you couldn't foresee that.
I really got lucky. I got bailed out. But I remember just sitting down stressing about it with my dad, and I was just like, hey, this isn't for me. I'm sorry. And I was, spent 6 months thinking about this conversation. He just said, that's fine. And as soon as he said that was fine, it kind of just, I don't know, it just brought the stress level down to a point where I could then figure out what I really wanted to do. And, from that point forward, when I was 16, 17, they had saved for me around $20,000, ever since I was a baby. And they said, hey, this is what we saved for you. You can use this for your college education. You can decide where you want to go. This is all you're getting. So if it's more than this, figure it out. But we wanted to let you know now so you can have that choice. You can have that decision. And at that point, that was 1997. So kind of ramping up into the internet bubble.
Oh, my. What a dangerous time to be told that you have some money.
Oh, it was spectacular.
I mean, it was great for a little while, right? And then
it was.
Yeah.
They ended up introducing me to their financial advisor. I threw that 20 grand into an account with him. He introduced me to some small cap tech names.
Oh, wow.
'Cause I was like, all right, let's grow this. And he, so he introduced me to a couple of them. I was in control of the capital, and I got lucky. I mean, that was sort of a similar instance, it feels like right now, where you could throw darts at some tech names and do well, and that's how that market was. And turned 20,000 to 120,000 in a few years by the time I graduated.
That's dope.
And it was 150% luck. I mean, there was no skill involved.
It still works, man.
Yeah, you think it's skill, but it's not. And so basically at that point, I was like, I don't want to blow all this money going to a private school. I'll just go to more of a public university. I'll commute and I'll work part-time, and so I can just pay the tuition so I can continue to invest. And so I actually ended up working for a financial advisor when I was in college, and I was more or less a glorified receptionist answering phones. But it was right at that peak of the bubble, that bubble popped, and that 120,000 turned into 8.
Yeah.
And so I wrote it back down.
Oh.
Also learned that at that point in time, I didn't really want to, I thought I was going to be a financial advisor, but then just answering the calls of, we had 1,000 clients at that office, about 120 million under management. And so, just answering those phone calls, I said, I do not want to deal with other people's emotions when it comes to investing. And so, at that point, those small cap tech names turned into microcaps. So
did your account.
Here we are. No.
As did your account. And then I started a microcap strategy. That's
yeah,
funny.
yeah, exactly. 20 years later, here we are. But from that point, the first company I really dived into with certainty at that point in time, when I had 8,000 left, was a company called XM Satellite Radio, which I told the story a couple of times before. But that was a microcap back then. It was less than $2 a share. They launched a bunch of satellites up into space, had a couple billion in debt. 40% of the stock was held short. People were betting it was going to go bankrupt. They really had no OEM agreements with manufacturers at that point in time. But I liked it because, a lot of people, I'm old now, I'm 40, but, people have to remember back with terrestrial radio, you drive 20 miles out of the area, you have to tune into a new one.
Yeah.
And just the thought of just crystal clear channels nationwide was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I was attracted to that story. And so, long story longer, I saw that they were presenting, the CEO was presenting up in New York City. And I called the conference organizer, made up a name that I worked for, Cassel Capital,
Yeah.
and had some business cards made, and they let me come to this event, took a bus ride from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from, where I'm still located, up to New York City. It's about 3 hours. And weaseled my way into a one-on-one with Hugh Panera, the CEO of the company.
Oh, nice.
And had 10 minutes chat with him. My eyes were as wide as saucers. So, I was just infatuated with the fact that I just talked to a CEO of a public company.
Yeah, no psychological bias there, huh?
No, not at all. And again, took that $8,000, threw it into XM at $1.78, And almost immediately, they started executing, signing OEM agreements, refinancing their debt. Big short covering rally took it from $1.78 to 34 in 14 months.
Whoa.
And so made the money back, and that was 150% luck as well. But I always kind of point to that story in particular.
That's bullshit, man. That's not luck because you put yourself in that room. It might have been serendipitous, right? And maybe you were, weren't as right on the thesis. But I think that like a lot of life is taking the reps and putting yourself out there and seeing where it leads, right?
Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, it's just not being afraid to step forward and just do what other people aren't doing.
Yeah.
So, really that got me started in microcap. And it was really what infatuated me was that conversation I had with that CEO. Just like, I can, sit across the table from a guy like this. I can't do that with Steve Jobs or whatever, small cap up to large cap name. And so that's what got me down the path of microcap. And that was the early 2000s. And, from that point forward, all the activity on microcaps, because a lot of these smaller microcaps are mainly retail owned, a lot of the due diligence and chatter is on public message boards.
Yeah.
And so especially back then. And so I got on those message boards, kind of created a following, a reputation on there, found a few mentors. I got really lucky on the mentor side. Had two individuals that were kind of the opposite of each other. And they really leaned into me and teaching me kind of some of the hard skills of investing and the soft skills of, qualitative approaches to investment. And and so from there I just kind of learned the ropes by losing my money and then making it back and losing my money and making it back. And at that point, I was still mainly centered on story stocks. I was not fundamentally driven. I was looking, where's the momentum going to occur? I'm going to be there before it occurs.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And that was my approach for the first, call it 5 years of me getting into microcap, kind of from that 2001 to 2006 time period. And at the same time, I went from college to graduate school to get my MBA, mainly because it was a socially acceptable way to waste time and kind of hone this craft. I could at least put a diploma up on the wall.
Yeah, like
which
me in
I
law
did.
school.
Yeah, exactly. But really the goal from the point in time where I was down to 8,000 was I wanted to be a full-time private investor. And that's what I would wake up thinking about every single day, of how can I just become a full-time private investor, managing my own capital, and not dealing with clients, employees, bosses, anything.
Yeah.
And so, with some luck and some skill involved, I was able to do that in 08, 09, actually during the crisis. So
how, that's an interesting time to be able to do that. That's a heck of a run up to it. And then what, did you sidestep a lot of the 08, 09 carnage?
Not necessarily. Up around 2007, I felt like I had enough capital. I mean, listen, I'm not in Manhattan. I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the heart of Amish country.
Dude, we're living similar lives. I told JP O'Shaughnessy, or Jim, I was like, Jim, I'm not trying to manage a ton of money into, I don't want to manage into a lifestyle. I would rather manage my lifestyle to what I have, and then if I have to cut my lifestyle a little bit, that's where I want to go with this. I want to be independent and run my own capital, and if that means sort of not having the sexiest life, so be it. And
that's the key to longevity and survival as a private investor. It's like you keep your fixed costs low and your variable costs variable.
Yeah,
it's like, fine, you can rev it up, go take your family on a 3-month vacation to Florida or wherever, but you can rev that back down the next year. And so
hopefully
that's what, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Until your wife says, no, we're doing this again.
That's exactly right. Until she's like, I'm used to this. Go get a good idea.
Yeah. In fact, now we're buying a place down.
That's right. And then you find yourself moving.
But really up until 07, I felt like I had enough capital. I just felt like I needed my strategy to be tested, and I didn't know that a bear market was right around the corner. And I was looking for a market to really test me, and that's what 08, 09 did. And once I went through that, and I didn't go through it unscathed, but I went through it. I got through it,
Yeah.
And that's what gave me the confidence to say, okay, I can do this. If I can make it through that environment when, peak to trough, the S&P or whatever was down 52%, and I'm still here and I can still support myself and I can still do this, and it doesn't change me mentally, seeing that drawdown in your account, having to pay the electric bill, and doesn't change your strategy. And that's the toughest thing that a lot of people don't realize in the private investing side is, people think 30% CAGRs are clipping off like coupons here lately, but there's going to be a 30% down year eventually, and God forbid a couple of them. And for me, when I kind of cut the cord of income, the question was, can I sustain two down 30%, 40% years in a row, and it doesn't change who I am?
Yeah. That's interesting. A lot of people, I love the way that you put that. That's a lot of people sort of, I see, are not into dividend stocks, right? Like, why would you want a dividend stock, right? You got to focus on how big the business is going to be. I agree with that. The reason for someone like me is I need cash flow, because sustainable cash flow can get you through 240% down years, right? Now, the business better be able to pay that out, so you got to be right on that. But I think that's I've tried to learn from Buffett in a way of like, he's got this float always coming in, so I need some sort of an income stream to come in to sort of create this, even if it's a suboptimal capital allocation decision for my life, I sort of need it as a I don't know, like a life raft or whatever.
Yeah, and the way I would approach it, if I was deciding today whether I would do this as a full-time private investor, the decisions and the influences would be completely different than when I was single, at the age of 28.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't have a wife, kids, mortgage. I kept things so lean. Like, I could live off $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
It wasn't, the more, when you get married, you have kids, you have obligations. You also have their stress, not wanting to let them down. Like, oh, sorry, kids, we can't go on a vacation this year, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It layers on, so it forces you to approach that decision differently.
Did you have like anything, if your dad ran a business, was there some variability in like growing up that you sort of wanted to avoid, or is that just something that you just don't want to deal with?
It was interesting what you mentioned. Like, I was the first person in our family to go to college, and I come from an interesting area. It's probably maybe it's similar to where you grew up, but there's a lot of blue collar entrepreneurs that are worth a lot of money in my area. They don't have a college education, but I wouldn't want to compete against them doing anything.
Yeah.
And even like Amish people give them think that they're dumb, working out in the field. I'll tell you what, some of the smartest people I know are Amish people, because they have no vices. All they do is think about work and family, and that's it. It's like, and so, they think through everything they do on a business side, probably more so than most realize.
Huh.
And I don't know why I'm necessarily going down that rabbit trail in this conversation, but I guess one of the points I wanted to make out was I didn't really have any financial influence early on outside, my parents weren't that interested in the markets that per se. I mean, they obviously had a financial advisor, but it's nothing that we, sat at home talking about during dinners, or anything like that. It was,
Yeah.
I just kind of, I don't know. It was just through some luck and some work, just kind of gravitated to investing, and then gravitated down to this niche of investing where I felt that I had an edge.
How'd you find investing?
Probably the financial advisor, like
Yeah.
when, that 20,000 got kind of thrown on me and like, here you go.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what do I do with it? That type of, just really from a very, I wish I could point to, I was reading the Wall Street Journal when I was 8, that was not happening.
Yeah.
Even
I wasn't either. I wasn't barely even interested in it until I was maybe 25. And in fact, college really turned me off to it, because I had like a big efficient markets guy as a teacher, and it was all about like, how do you figure out the discount rate and the weighted average cost of capital and tied to beta. And I'm like, I just don't really, it just didn't like resonate with me. And it took my grandma's friend he sent me like 2 Bogle books and then one of the Intelligent Investor, and I thought that was a kind of a sick joke to sandwich the Intelligent Investor and those 2 things. He could have just told me to index and never put my life down this path, but I'm glad he did.
Well, and you realize that too. It's like at a lot of times we're just not at the right spot to even read those things. Like for me, I started out in story stocks, and I didn't read Buffett until after I was a private full-time investor. That was the first time I read a letter, and it wasn't because I was smart. In fact, I was probably dumb, but my strategy wasn't in line with his thoughts, and so I just wasn't in a place to understand that. And it's only really probably after I became a full-time private investor that I completely pivoted in how I learned. And I learned the most by talking to people that invest differently than me. Nothing's better or more influential is when you can kind of see a person that's doing it the opposite of you and doing it successfully, and you're like, well, that's interesting. There's something you can learn from them.
Yeah, man, that's why I love David Gardner so much.
Yep.
Because he's my perception of the complete opposite of me. And I look at his results and I'm like, this cannot be argued with. I mean, how sort of, I guess, the fool markets themselves or whatever is debatable. Like, I understand why people have some problems with that, and I used to too, but the where I messed up is I sort of, don't even know why I have problems with it. I mean, if I'm perfectly honest, it's just like standard newsletter marketing. What would I not like about that? And then the second thing was I was just too dumb to open my mind to why.
Yeah, I mean, I think the longer you invest, the more you realize that the way you do things, your strengths are in the areas that you're different, and you can find almost anybody that is successful, that's considered a goat of their niche of investing, completely different from somebody else. You have, Sloss with 100 positions, you have Fisher with 12, you have, it doesn't matter how you look at things. You have the VC side down to deep value side. I had a conversation with an investor, and I've been trying to get him to come on one of these podcasts, but I remember I met him at a conference, and was the opposite of me. I'm concentrated in a few positions, growth oriented, and he's throwing up 35% CAGRs, being deep value in 200 names and not caring about management. It's just like the opposite of me.
Wow.
And I was like, well, how do you, and it's just one man. I'm like, how do you, he's like, oh yeah, I have a fund, and I have, let's say it's 30 million under management. I have positions that are $500 worth.
Huh.
What? Like, what? How do you, like, but I was like, wait. And it just erupted into like a 3-hour conversation because I was immediately interested in that, because it was literally like me looking at the opposite of me.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that's that successful. And almost every case you can learn something and apply that to your own investing. It doesn't mean you pivoting towards them. It just means being able to take a piece of something from that conversation and apply it to how you evaluate something.
Yeah. Do you remember what you took from that?
With him, it started changing my belief on position sizing a little bit. I used to believe that, if it's not going to be, and I'm concentrated, so let's call it a dozen positions. It used to be like 4 or 5 when I was, younger. But, if it can't be a 5% position, why are you paying attention to it? That means you don't have any conviction in it, especially in a concentrated portfolio. Where just talking to him and how he approached taking, a 0.5% position, kind of watching it, being able to buy more of it later, as he would follow it. That's probably one of the key takeaways I took to my strategy. That was like probably 4 or 5 years ago, where now I'm willing to take on a smaller position size because sometimes I have to, because of the liquidity profile, where you might only get 20% of the position you want just because the stock moves away from you. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have it on, because your best dollar is in that investment when you put it in. And it doesn't mean that stock's not going to come back down to where you can buy it again. It doesn't mean that management might not execute and make it be a better buy at a higher price than it was at a lower price.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of changed my viewpoint on how I position size.
Yeah, I struggle with a similar thing because I don't know. So I run my fantasy football team. I have a lot of churn at the bottom. And it's something that, like, my mind just sort of, it helps me feel like I'm doing something, but the core positions almost never change. And I noticed something very similar in my portfolio, which part of me says, well, just stop that. And part of me is like, well, as a human, like this is kind of how I deal with something that I need to deal with, right? Like I acknowledge that's a weakness. This is how I deal with it and whatever. And I guess that I need to be mindful that I'm not making stupid decisions at the bottom of the portfolio with smaller position sizes and taking them, sort of willy-nilly. I guess that's the downside of that strategy, but I personally think that I benefited a fair amount from not having like it must be 5% or bigger.
I think and your point on turnover is one that hit me too, and I would say my portfolio is similar to what you described with yours. There's a lot of turnover in the lower half because I'm constantly trying to find and be in the ones that are executing. And I'm investing in small emerging companies, so they evolve in different ways, and I kind of compare them to 3-year-old kids where you don't leave them in your house alone because they're going to burn the house down. It's the same thing with these microcaps. You got to be watching them, and a lot of times when they evolve, it's not in a good way, and so you can't be afraid to take the position off and redeploy it into things that are working. And so my portfolio is similar to you, and in that regard. And I think in general, there's been such a buy and hold mantra right now where people are judged on their performance and their low turnover, and it's a thing of pride. But when you evaluate some of the best, call it doing air quotes, buy and hold investors, a lot of their best performance came in their highest turnover years. Buffett had 80-90% turnover, over 20 years during his best performance. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that, and so, same with Lynch, same with a lot of other people. They had, same with Greenblatt, 200% turnover, when he was doing it. I mean, these portfolios were being turned over, and people look at that with a negative eye. But when you actually analyze it, portfolio turnover, a lot of times when done correctly, is the price of progress in the portfolio.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that one of the things that people don't necessarily think about all the time, or at least I didn't, I'll just internalize it. With Buffett, it's really important to think about like, well, what's the vehicle that he's describing his strategy in, right? That's a way, way different question than, okay, if you were young and you were an independent investor, would you invest this way? I suspect he'd have much. I mean, he has said as much that he would have more turnover. I don't know how much, but I suspect it'd be quite a bit more.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's something that I never really thought about my turnover until I started managing some outside investors' capital, and somebody asked me about it, and I pulled it up on Interactive Brokers, and I'm like, oh wow, looks like we had 130% turnover over the last 24 months. And it kind of got me thinking that down that route of, and I analyzed some of my, of the previous 15 years of investing, and it was not quite that high, but it was similar. And, then I started asking myself the questions that investors would likely ask me, like, are we trading here? Are we trying to find great companies? And so I kind of dived down that rabbit hole of, at least for me and what I do, I'm just constantly trying to be in the best companies I can find. And a lot of them, there's 20 million market cap rookies on that team that you might need to cut.
Yeah.
And then the ones that ultimately end up growing and being something more significant, they're sort of like the veterans on the squad, and you keep them, so
yeah.
And there's going to be some turnover there. Like the players you win with 5 years from now are probably going to be different than the ones you won with this year.
Yeah. I love that you're saying it this way, because I've thought of a stock portfolio as like a baseball team a lot, and I actually think that Buffett does too. If you listen to some of the ways that he speaks, I think sports. Albert Pujols, when he was in his prime, is not the Albert Pujols that went to the Angels, and the Angels paid him a lot. So I think that there's sometimes these like there are definitely companies that have hit sort of this part of their growth curve where, if you're looking at the last 7 years or whatever, it's really easy to say, oh, this thing's going to grow and grow and grow. But, some of them turn into the older Albert Pujols, which is still a fine player, but it's not the guy that, you'd think you're buying. and
Exactly.
vice versa, right? But I do think momentum breeds momentum. I think turning around bad momentum is probably quite a bit harder than continuing positive momentum.
Yeah, I realized early on, I'm more for, and it's obviously it's easy to say that in this environment, but I'm definitely more geared towards a growth mindset of trying to find winners that keep winning, albeit down in the microcap realm, because if they're winning, they have obviously a much larger runway ahead of them because they're small companies.
Yeah.
And I just have done poorly investing in situations, betting that they can get less worse.
Yeah. Well, I'm going through it with Wells Fargo. It's kind of hard to watch the thesis that I sort of thought would play out, and not participate. But part of the reason that I'm not participating is I was sitting around and thinking, like, is there just Ally, for example, is a business that I think I have a reasonably high degree of confidence that it's going to be bigger in 5 years than it is today. With Wells, I have a fair degree of confidence, but there's a lot going on in that entity, and it's forget about how big it is. That's a problem in and of itself. But I just kind of have not gotten back involved because of exactly what you're articulating. I don't know that I really want to put capital in turnaround situations on a go forward basis.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I do have a couple turnarounds. It is part of what I look for because especially in the smaller realm, when you see a management change, it can often lead to a deep value situation, where they're selling off some areas that they shouldn't have gotten into to focus on a growth area. You can make obviously multi-baggers on deep value that turn into growth situations again. Companies that trade on a ratio to their balance sheet that start trading on a multiple of their earnings again.
Yeah.
That's how you get 10 baggers, quite
Yeah.
honestly doing that. So I do have some filters out there, mainly alongside of like rights offerings and large insider purchases, which kind of triggers management changes. That's kind of like some of the things I look for. But that's kind of the only area of reason I look kind of at the value or deep value bucket is to spot those.
Why like a skeptic would or I would ask, why are there like good growth companies that are microcaps? Why are those not private? Because it seems inefficient to have all the costs of being a public company and also, have a business that's working. I don't understand why it's not taken private or owned by private equity or something like that.
Well, the answer to that kind of changes depending on the geography you're in. If you're looking at the United States, we obviously have a very robust private equity and venture capital arena right now. It's much easier for private companies to get funded, and so over the last 10 years, I would say in the U.S. there's, albeit take the last 6 months out of it, there's been a reduction of small companies kind of going public as microcap companies. Um, Pre 2010, I don't hear a lot of conversation about this, but we always have read a lot of articles and white papers on how, the death of the public company, especially here in the United States, how there's, half as many public companies as there were 20 years ago. What a lot of people don't realize is up until around 2010, there was 800 reverse mergers done a year in the United States.
Hmm.
That's basically, private company reverse merging and RTOing into a public shell company. Almost all of them are small microcaps.
Hmm.
And obviously a large percentage of them either fail or flounder or whatever, but it's still the law of large numbers where a certain percentage of them do grow up and, get listed and that type of
Yeah.
thing. The Chinese frauds that occurred in 2010, which were also RTOs, kind of put a death to that means of going public, which
Hmm.
was really a low cost, low amount of capital, meaning you could do that with a $1 to $5 million raise at the same time, go public. And that 800 went down to about 100 to 150.
Hmm.
Um, and and so we are seeing a resurgence of small companies going public now, albeit they're more small capish if you want to look at SPACs. But if you go up to Canada, they don't really have quite the private equity or venture capital influence up there. So you still have really unique small companies going public up in Canada. You still actually see it quite a bit in Australia, where you see actually real businesses, not just life science companies trying to raise 10 million for a phase one trial, but actual, real businesses going
Yeah.
public on those markets. Even the UK, it's an interesting dynamic where I did I did some brute force research going A through Z through their London AIM exchange, which is where most of their microcaps are traded. And the odd thing is you saw quite a few 10 million, $20 million IPOs of some really unique businesses that ultimately went up 5 or 10x over the last 4 or 5 years. And you saw that like BlackRock participated in the IPO,
Hmm.
and like these large
Huh.
bulge bracket institutions, and you never see that over here,
Yeah.
so it's like, well, why is that happening there? So I guess it's a long answer to your question, but it really depends on what geography you're focusing on. And I think obviously some of the speculation that's coming back into the market right now, um, more small companies are going public here in the US now. And I think it's hopefully going to, and you're going to take some bad with the good with that. But I'm hoping it leads to more of a resurgence of smaller companies going public again, because 20,000 public companies in North America, so the U.S. and Canada, about half of them are microcaps defined by sub 300 million. So there's it's half of all the publicly traded companies are still microcap companies in North America. So it's a big number of companies. It's 8,000, 9,000 companies. And that's more than the amount of companies that trade in the Nasdaq and the New York Stock Exchange combined.
Hmm.
So it's a big sandbox, and obviously not all of them are investable or investable grade. But you know, like I tell most people that when they get started in this space that don't have your background, Bill, or my background, is unfortunately a lot of people just get brought into a story stock, something that doesn't have a balance sheet, doesn't it's just a story. And obviously in this market in the last 3 months it might work.
Yeah, that's worked out
But
pretty nice.
yeah, exactly. It's outperformed all of us. But usually the best advice is, okay, out of those 9,000 microcaps in North America, 15% of them are profitable. So just focus on that, the
Yeah.
15%. You can do really well just focusing on them. And they most of them still file their Ks and their Qs and their 8Ks with the SEC. They're still audited. Just focus on the profitable ones that actually have real businesses.
Yeah. I was looking through Connor Haley's presentation. For those that don't know, he's at AltaFox Capital Management. He's got all his presentations on his site.
Connor's a goat.
Yeah, he is a beast. We had to reschedule the interview, but I'm happy that we did it. He wanted to do it in order to have a better conversation later. I was like, dude, I'm on your time, whatever. But I thought that presentation that he gave, the making of a multi-bagger, I thought that the geographical distribution was interesting. It's skewed. The U.S. is underrepresented in that.
Correct.
So that sort of like opened my eyes a little bit to maybe you should be, fishing more globally, right? And I know that that's sort of a silly thing to say, but I am starting with your encouragement to look smaller, and I think that I'm going to have to be comfortable going outside. How do you get over like the due diligence hurdle when it's, an Australian company or a, LSE or whatever? Like, are you flying to those geographies? Are you calling people that over there? How much is, your network? This is sort of a generic question that people always ask. What's your process?
Maybe another way to answer that or be helpful is, I'm looking at a microcap in Australia or the UK. I'm mainly looking for, obviously a good business that I think is differentiated, but also one that's global. I'm not necessarily interested in investing in an Australian microcap that just has all their operations and their business all in Australia.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me, and you can find this, whether it's Australia or the London AIM, you can find businesses that are real global businesses. They just happen to be headquartered in Australia.
Yeah.
And that really helps not only show you the breadth and maturity of that's actually a business, but it's helpful for due diligence too. But obviously over the last 12 months you can't travel anywhere. So
no, it's been tough. You got to Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of Zoom, but
yeah.
But I mean, kind of the main focuses on due diligence are kind of the normal stuff you would normally hear. Just read everything that's public, and I do a lot of qualitative due diligence, trying to talk to as many, and this is probably the biggest takeaway from writing those two books on Intelligent Fanatics, which for people that don't know about them, Charlie Munger is the first person to use the term intelligent fanatic, and that's basically an entrepreneur that grew a company from zero into something that dominated a niche or geography or industry. And they dominated it not just for a year or two, but for 30, 40, 50 years. How does somebody do that? And then what are the kind of character traits or the systems or the cultures they put in place to allow them to sustain that dominance? And I was interested in learning that just because what I've found over time, and we started that project in 2016, was the smaller the company you look at, the more important management becomes.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to fine tune my lens for my qualitative lens for investing. If I want to find great companies, I'm going to need to find great leaders. And so, what were some of these characteristics that some of these folks had and some of the systems they put in place? So that's kind of the backdrop. And our first book was basically going over 8 intelligent fanatics that Charlie Munger mentioned. Our second book, we found another 10 that we thought were interesting, that we wrote another book on them. But one of the biggest takeaways from those 2 books was, probably up until that point, I was focusing too much on the individual themselves that was leading the organization and not enough on the organization or the people they had around them. And Brent Beshore, who I know you're good friends with as well, you'll probably have him on this podcast, but I love the way he phrases it, because he's kind of doing what I'm trying to do in the public small company universe. He's trying to do in the private small company universe. And so we've always connected on just our own thought process, but he talks about it as a hustle. Like, he runs into a lot of private businesses, and we all know of them too. My family's one, for most part, is that, is a hustle. It's not a real business. It's a 1 or 2 or 3 person operation, and it's just like a hustle. How much work are you going to put in is how much effort and revenue you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot in microcap as well, where when you get down sub 100 million market cap, 80% of the companies you're looking at are still hustles. They don't have the infrastructure, the systems in place, the processes in place to scale. And that's the bet you're making as a microcap investor, that this isn't going to be a 10 million revenue company anymore, that this can be 100. And a lot of times, if you're still investing in a hustle, it's limited by that leader that's running that company. And it's a tough transition to make, and it's a tough transition for any private or public company to make. Is they're so used to bootstrapping, it's hard to then start spending in the ways that's going to allow them to 10x the business.
Yeah.
They're just so used to doing everything themselves, and not trusting other people.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think that when you said spending, I was thinking too outsourcing, right? Spending can also be thought of as sort of letting go a little bit of control. And I would think a lot of the guys it's a different skill set to build a company from 0 to 5 million, then 5 to 50 million, and then 50 and up. I could see how that would be tough. You almost have to ask, like, different types of qualitative questions, right? How do you think about building systems? How would you succeed in this company if you were starting out? So will you ask to talk to other people in the company too?
Yes.
Yeah.
I make that a point. I do a lot of expert interviews too, trying to talk to past employees and management as well.
How do you source those? Just reaching out on LinkedIn, or
you
just
can
have
do
a
it through
network?
LinkedIn. You can also, if you have the means, you can use a platform like Tegus. There's one, and there's other ones that you can use that kind of do that front end work for you and find the people, and then just set up the interview for you to have.
Yeah.
But you can also just utilize LinkedIn and reach out. But I find that's really helpful when you talk to past employees or management. And obviously, there's usually going to be a negative slant because they don't work there anymore, and you have to understand that. But there's usually some really interesting tidbits you can pick up that you wouldn't be able to pick up elsewhere. So that's a big part of the qualitative due diligence process I do, is just not only talking to the people that are currently around that leader, but ones that used to be there and why they left.
Yeah. And then trying to remove whatever bias that may or may not be there, right?
Exactly.
How is when did you start MicroCapClub?
So I became a full-time private investor. It would have been in early 2009, kind of right at the depths of that crisis. And then I had my own blog for maybe 3 or 4 years leading up to that. And I was always a concentrated investor, and I would just talk about what I liked and why. And the slogan of the blog was "Life's too short to diversify."
There
That
you
was
go.
the slogan. So and so that was the slogan, and I'd be talking about the 4 or 5 names that I liked, and I had a growth mindset. I'm interested in finding things that are undervalued that can get overvalued. And when you're successful in that,
Yeah, I like how you said that the other day. Right?
when you're
Not fairly valued, but overvalued.
exactly, like you want to find some special things that there's a scarcity. I love scarcity in all its
Yeah.
forms. Same thing with the public markets. So if you're going to be if you're successful in finding those types of companies, you're going to run into shorts quite a bit, because if you're successful, you found something, it goes way up, probably too far, too fast. The shorts are going to start coming after those names too. And I had quite a string of those instances where I would start writing about something, and a few of them ended up being big winners, and then the shorts just started targeting kind of everything that I was involved in.
Oh, no.
And it was obvious too. It was pretty funny. And I was starting to be on Twitter then, and people would laugh at my handle back in the day, because I was the opposite of what I am today on Twitter. Like, I was very aggressive. I'd be like, I'm bidding for 1 million shares. Come at me. Like that type of, it's like, which obviously is not how I'm on Twitter today.
Yeah, no, it's much more toned down.
Yeah, exactly. And so I had that, and it just reached a point where it wasn't productive to be sharing my ideas publicly anymore.
Yeah.
And so I shut down my blog, and I was thinking, and I for a few months.
That's funny, dude. I couldn't imagine you being like that on Twitter.
Oh yeah, no, I was completely that way. It was constantly, come at me, bro.
Yeah. Looking for a fight, you want to short it, that's fine. I'm the buyer.
Right, exactly. That's basically how I was communicating. And so at that point, I was like, I still like to talk about stocks, but I don't want to do it publicly. And I'm really interested in what other people that are good in this area are interested in. So why don't we just create a private community where we could have these discussions privately about what we liked and why, and let's keep out the public.
Yeah.
Let's keep out people from seeing these conversations the best we can, and just keep it a high level type conversation. And so 2011 launched MicroCapClub.com, and I always thought, the worst case, this is just going to be me talking to myself, and it'll be like my own private journal. That was kind of my worst case, which wasn't that bad of a worst case. But luckily, started attracting some good investors into it. And it took 3, 4, 5 years until I would say it wasn't me posting 60% of the posts on there. It just took time.
Yeah.
And there was no monetization of the site. It was just that. It was just smart dudes talking privately about what they liked. And then, then it just turned into something bigger. And so, now 10 years later, it's about 250 members from across the world, ranging.
Oh, am I one of 250?
No, well, then we launched a subscriber portion.
I'm one of these. I'm just a lurker.
Yeah, well, it kind of.
Not
even
for
back
long.
then when I launched it, I just wanted it to look really professional and just cost money. So it was costing me like $30,000 a year running this site, and I was just like, oh, this is getting old. I was like, but how do I monetize this site that doesn't make me look like a douchebag?
Are you talking about MicroCapClub or my podcast?
Yeah.
Same shit, man.
Yeah, right, exactly. And like, I was probably overly cautious about the brand, but I was just like, I don't want to monetize this and be like, all right, look, come look at this guru.
This is the exact same shit. The exact same shit.
I know. And I struggled with it for 5 years, and finally I said, you know what? Let's just launch a view-only portion of this where, it costs $500 if people want to get in and see where these conversations are. That'll keep out, 90% of the people that shouldn't be on here, because it's a price point that's too high for the guy that's willing to spend $10 to see what you want to say.
Yeah.
And so then we launched the subscribers in 2016, brought in a partner, Mike Schellinger, who's Mike DD King on Twitter. He's also a full-time private investor. He came on board to help me kind of roll that out. And so now we have the subscriber portion that actually makes this a sustainable business now, which is nice.
Yeah.
But, so we have about 250 members. And the cool thing is, and I always wanted it to be this way, I didn't want money to be a hurdle in getting smart people to join the site. So it doesn't cost anybody as a member to be somebody that produces the content.
Yep.
It's only if you don't have the time or ability to ever become a member, you pay to be a subscriber. And so,
Yeah.
because what I found just like earlier on, most of these ideas are found by small retail. It's the dude with $2,000 in his brokerage account. He's the one scouring the earth trying to find that small obscure company, and I want him or her on the site more than the billionaire investor.
Yeah,
So
for
we
sure.
want we want that young talent to be coming in.
Yeah,
So
hungry and
it's
talented.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah. I was going to write up this company, Intrepid Potash. People, if you're listening, this really is not investment advice. But they were down at like $150 million market cap, maybe 200, but it's a commodity company. And I was like, I don't know. I wasn't, I mean, I've made money on the name before, and I sort of thought it was pretty cheap, but I couldn't, other than like a commodity cycle, I couldn't really articulate why it would be a buy. And now the commodity cycle has like started to go up. We'll see how sustainable it is, right? I don't know how much of this commodity boom is real versus just sort of short-term COVID related stuff. So I'm still I still would not write it up to submit it, but I am a little bit remiss that I didn't, because it would have worked and I would have gotten my membership by deserving it rather than paying. But over time I will work to deserve the membership.
Well, you could still, you can apply at any time. So we'd love to have
I
you.
know, man.
In fact, the subscriber, what we find on the subscriber side is a lot of people subscribe, especially if they don't have maybe the background on the investing side to kind of learn, and then they end up ultimately applying to become a member. So probably 10 or 20% of our applications, which we get lately, it's been 25 people applying every month to get in
Oh
as
yeah,
a member.
nice.
Yeah, and so every month our membership then votes on the quality of those theses, and if you get enough
How does
votes, you
that
get in.
work?
So if you want to become a member, you write a 2 or 3 page investment thesis, in your favorite
Yeah.
microcap stock. I basically aggregate them, and at the end of every month, the membership, not the subscribers, the membership
Yeah.
votes on the quality level of each one of those theses, and if you
Ooh,
get
I
over
like
2/3
it.
vote, you get in.
Very democratic, sir.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the way it should be. And so out of 20, we might get maybe 4 or 5 that get in.
Nice.
So it's not easy to get in, but it's a great way to always be bringing in and it's a great way to find ideas. Like a lot of the new ideas are coming in from the applications.
Yeah.
So and that's how I view MicroCapClub. It's a idea engine. It's not a guru service. It's not come look at Ian. He made so much money. Go buy his picks service. It's here's a bunch of smart people talking about what they like and why, and you're going to get a ample flow of new ideas every month.
Yeah. That has been the largest benefit from the whole podcast stuff that I've done, and it's the part that I would push back on people that say that they don't want to be public on things because of confirmation bias and whatever. I agree that is a potential cost of being public, but the benefit that I've gotten from the idea flow is awesome, and then I sort of think like my skill set in life is connecting with people. So I've started to try to be like very, very conscious of, okay, if an idea crosses my desk, who do I know that, like I may not be able to opine, but how can I help this person get to somebody that can help them and like matchmake, right? And then if you can create sort of an idea flywheel around you, for lack of a better term, I hate that term because it's so overused, but it's very real. And the listeners are like, I mean, somebody told me not to put myself down anymore. So I'll say that the listeners are at least equally as smart, but sometimes I'm very intimidated by my listenership.
No, I mean, I think what you hit on is crucial, and it's something that I try to do too, is just, obviously give to those people, of the network as much as you can, but it's just a huge asset when, especially with my investing, like I have a database of, all right, here's a private equity investor that only focuses on life science and diagnostics.
Yeah.
Keep track of that, and you just categorize these folks based on their interest level. And also when you're finding something interesting, you're showing them something, you're getting their feedback on whatever it is. It's a win-win. And, over time you have, 50, 100, 500 of these folks that you can turn to, that you're showing value to, they're showing value to you. That's how you create something big. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Ali Hamed talks about that quite a bit. I don't know if you listen to a couple of his podcasts.
Who does?
How he, Ali.
Oh yeah.
He's great. He does probably the best job at networking, what I just described, of anybody. That's how he kind of started his firm from scratch into a monster of a VC firm now.
Wow.
Just by networking mainly.
Huh. I need to listen to more different types of podcasts. Like I don't listen to a lot of the VC guys, but to your point on sort of listening to people that think differently, I think that I would learn a lot if I sort of got more plugged into that community. Just, if nothing else, just how they look at life, right? And the thing that has resonated with me about microcaps is just the math of there is only so big a $300 billion company can get. I mean, I don't know, we have all sort of, I think, had our minds blown by how big these big companies can get.
Bigger. That's what.
Yeah. Well, and global scale is super important. And once you're global, it's really hard to compete with. And I get all that. But by definition, I think the biggest winners have to come from the smallest companies. Just that seems to be how the math has to work.
Well, and everybody, the thing that still boggles my mind today as we're talking about microcaps is just the perception difference between small private equity, venture capital, and microcap investing. Those first two are widely accepted and loved ways to invest.
Yeah, microcap is totally crapped on.
Oh yeah, it's still this slimy sleaze bin of why is this even here?
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous it's kind of one of the things, it's one of the main reasons I'm even still on Twitter, is because this light needs to be continued to be lit. The best investors ever started at microcap, whether it's Greenblatt to Peter Lynch, Buffett. Most of the best performing companies ever started were microcap companies, whether it was Berkshire Hathaway, which was still a microcap, inflation adjusted when he took it over, or whether it was Walmart or Netflix, Intuitive Surgical. You rattle down a list of names, the best performing ones. Many of them were microcaps. When you look at Connor Haley's study of like the best performing stocks, over the last 5 years, 70% of them originated out of the microcap ecosystem. This is a viable investment landscape, and unlike private equity, unlike venture capital, where the only way you're going to get the best deals is, it's who the right schools you went to, who's your buddy, did they go to Stanford? Everybody has access to these names down in microcap. There's 35,000 of them across the world. And unlike those other areas, you have the edge. You have the structural edge as a smaller investor. I could say smaller if you're managing less than 20 million or maybe even 50 million, where those large institutional players can't ever invest in these because they're too illiquid. It's easier for them to be in something that's completely not liquid than it is to be in something that's illiquid, because it marks to market then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's an incredible landscape where, it's kind of a walled off city, where here in microcap, retail and smaller institutions are in the city gates and all the institutions are on the outside. And they can't get in because they can never buy these things. And that's the structural advantage. They can only buy it once their management teams execute, the stocks go up, liquidity profile increases, and they can then put larger capital to work. They have to wait till these stocks are higher.
Yeah.
You have the advantage because you can actually find them smaller before. You're the smart money, they're the dumb money.
Yeah. Yeah, and the interesting thing about that, to your point on like a name that can get overvalued, is, and I hate having this thought because it's very not like fundamental, right? By definition, what I'm about to say is not. But I also think that not recognizing it is not acknowledging reality. And that is like the amount of, once the flows start, they can get so much, like you can get just this uplift, right? And then the comp set that people have to use sort of changes, right? And as the company gets bigger, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, well, the company is bigger, so the comp should be, the multiple should be a little bit higher, right? Because it's a little bit more certain or something like that. And perception of a story may change a lot more than the real story changes, but you can make a lot of money riding that perception change. Or just to your point, the fact that flows can come in.
It's what I call the institutionalizing of a company. and you're right. You see this greater waves. You actually see it when when a small company executes, the liquidity profile increases, it goes up, and you can see these greater and greater waves of liquidity come into something. When the Russell indices first buy, it's like choo 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 choo. Then then the institutions start buying. Then all of a sudden, like you said, there's a company that I own, small. It was a $3 stock, and I actually had an analyst that covered it with like a $6 price target. Nothing has changed with that business whatsoever. I know that business probably better than most. Now it's a $30 stock, and
Wow.
the analyst has like a $35 price target on it. The numbers, the expectations are still the same.
Yeah.
Now it's trading millions of dollars a day compared to tens of thousands, before. And to your point, that's kind of the point you were making. It's like nothing really changed here. It's just,
Yeah.
the company's just bigger, more liquid, larger money's involved, and now they're just rationalizing a higher stock price. Okay.
Yeah. So how is somebody that anchors or doesn't even anchor, the story from $3? How do you look at something at $30 and sort of like mentally adjust where the multiple sort of was versus where it is today? And I would find myself being scared to hold something like that, I think, if I was anchored to the multiple back before it was institutionalized.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
I don't own that one in particular because it just got to a point where, when I owned it, I thought it would be a $10 stock in a couple of years, and now it's 30.
Yeah.
And really nothing's changed with the expectations, And believe me, I look back at it, I'm like, boy, I'm an idiot. It's just.
Yeah. Well, man, it's an interesting time in the market. Everybody's biggest mistake right now is selling.
Yes.
That doesn't we'll see how it all ends up, but that has my nerves racked a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
No, it is. I don't know if I've ever seen it like this. It reminds me, even on the microcap side, the momentum you're seeing just come into names and the liquidity of them. There was a company that I don't want to mention it, but it actually just happened this week where, again, nothing really changed with it. It was just the Robinhood crowd, the momentum crowd just hit the thing. This was like a $2 stock that traded 20,000 shares a day, and nothing changed with the business. They put out the same press releases they put out every year. It's just now all of a sudden it trades. I think this week it traded 250 million shares at $20 one day.
What?
6 million shares are outstanding. It just doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
Yes, it's just, and I'm seeing that across the board in some things. There's another crazy one that's out there, and I'll give this symbol just because I don't mind it, but like NNDM is one. That's another crazy one. They start at like 30, 40 cents, and the momentum train has just hit that thing. They've literally raised money, I think, every other week since July.
Good for them.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd argue
it's
that's
now,
good management.
I know. Well, that's what I mean. It's great, actually. I mean, I'm so impressed. It's like it was a 30 million market cap last summer. They really haven't done too much. It's now a $2 billion market cap with probably $1.2 billion in cash.
Wow.
They just raised 500 million last week again.
That's crazy.
So it's just unreal what you're seeing out there. And it is a little bit scary, but quite honestly, I don't pay too much attention to the macro side of things. I just pay attention to the micro, the things that I own and have control over.
Yeah.
Because we could be having the same conversation in 5 years, and nobody wants to sit on 80% cash if we're having this conversation in 5 years. So.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of what I say to Jake sometimes, right? It's like I understand some of the fear, and I don't even think necessarily it's wrong, but I also don't know why it stops. And if it doesn't stop and everybody else is making, 10, 20% a year, it's not even like a FOMO thing. It's a risk thing. Like if you're holding cash, you have opportunity cost risk. And even if the environment is kind of nuts, there are some reasonable things to do. And if you're not doing the reasonable things, I think that you can fall really behind. And I do think you would agree with that. I just think sometimes in the other podcast, it's easier to sort of spar and troll each other a little bit. I think people enjoy it.
I know I do.
Yeah. Well, but it's kind of hard to. I mean, I don't know, man. A lot of things have to go right in a lot of these names, and that, I mean, what you're talking about, a $30 million company going to $2 billion. I mean, the fact that they raised $1.5 billion, I would argue they should have been like, that's a really strong decision on management. But I'll be more interested in that when it's a $750 million company with the cash on the balance sheet.
Exactly. No, the nice thing about microcap is even in an environment like this, you can still find undiscovered names.
Yeah.
You can still find businesses that are good businesses that aren't trading at 100 times earnings or sales. So you can still find those businesses. I'm finding a lot more of them, almost probably equally the same as what Connor Haley had in that report in Australia, Europe. And I branched out into those areas in the last 3 years, mainly because of the types of businesses that I was finding, but also knowing those are also markets that have similar accounting rules, regulations as we have here in the United States. It's like I'm not going to, whatever, some far off exchange somewhere, in Namibia or something. I'm going to these kind of developed countries that I can still understand their filings. They have similar accounting laws, and I feel comfortable investing there.
Yeah. Do you need like a prime over there to get you a block of stock? How do you get placed with some of the liquidity?
That can be a frustrating part. Interactive Brokers, which is who I use, gives you access to a lot of those exchanges worldwide. But even they are cumbersome in some regards to some of those exchanges. There's some exchanges they don't even give you access to. But they're easy to use for Australia. They're easy to use for Canada. They're a little bit more cumbersome in the UK because I don't think they have, believe it or not, direct access to the exchange in the UK, which is kind of asinine to me. But
yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
They rely on this OTC auction process. So here's a funny story. So I found this company. I did all the work into it. I was like, great, we're going to buy this company. We're going to put it on as a small position and follow it because it has all the things we look for. We did the work on it. I go and put the order in, and it's like, it's not executed. I'm like, I'm putting in an order above the market. Just get me something, not executing. I'm like, what is going on? This happened for 2 days. I was like, it's showing there's 20,000 shares on the offer at, 100 pence, and I'm bidding 105.
Yeah.
It's just
yeah.
not
Why
giving me
can't
any
I
stock.
get these damn things?
Yeah. Finally, I call up Interactive Brokers, and in the UK, at least, on their AIM exchange, you can only buy it through some secondary auction process. So every 3 hours during their market trading, every 3 hours in the last 15 minutes of every 3 hour period, they have an auction process where I don't know if it's a bunch of cattle herders come together and trade shares. It's like backwoods, I don't know. But
that is some bizarre stuff.
4 15-minute segments that you might get stock. And so I was bidding for stock over 3 weeks and got $1,000 worth.
That's crazy.
And so I was like, well, that's just great. And I called their European trading desk, and I don't believe they can actually put a market on the exchange. I could go to a market maker, but they'd bid me way too high. They'd be like, oh yeah, we can give you 100,000 shares, 35% higher.
Yeah.
That type of thing. So
yeah.
Anyway, you probably didn't need to hear that rabbit trail of a story.
No, I like it. I was talking to Andrew Kuhn about a position he was trying to build, and he's dealing with, off-market people that are trying to source private blocks. It's such a different world than what I'm used to. It's really interesting.
It is. I mean, you almost do have to source, depending on how much capital you manage. You have to find other ways to get that stock, and sometimes it's through private transactions.
You know what he told me? That kid's only 25.
That's insane. I know.
I mean, I was like, dude, the world is going to be your oyster. You have got, I wish I knew at 25 what he knows.
Oh, I'm a big fan of his. I can only imagine. It's crazy the younger, when I was in my mid-20s and I'd go to a microcap event, I was the youngest person there by 50 years. The microcap scene was very old. It was 75-year-old brokers out of Colorado, kind of going to these things. Now it's all 20-somethings, which, it's, and you could say that's a result of the market environment we've had over the last 10 years, people only realizing a bull market.
Yeah.
But I view that as a good thing. I mean, the amount of talent is insane. I have a full-time analyst with me now, Michael Liu, who I source from MicroCapClub. Not only is the club's a good way to source ideas on the stock side, but it's a great way to source talent because a lot of the best investors started in microcap, and I think we have a lot of them on MicroCapClub, and so you get to kind of see who the up and coming talent is on there. And got to know Michael really well, and he was the youngest person to ever get into MicroCapClub at the age of 15. He submitted
Wow.
a CETIS.
Good for him.
And like now he's 21, and he's smarter than most other people that I talk to about investing. Like, and I tell him every day, I lean into him as much as I can, how much I can teach him. But it's like you're gonna take over the world in 40 years.
Yeah.
So
when are you gonna start teaching me, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
But
It's really.
But I think that's the key to all this stuff is just putting. I know for me too, like all I've ever done is sit in the corner of my house and research stocks and manage my own portfolio. Now I do it for a few others, and it's kind of opened my eyes to, now having Michael with me full time, and he's really great at things that I'm not good at and understanding where you're deficient. Like I don't enjoy going through that filing and trying to find the I that's not dotted.
Yeah.
But he does.
Yeah.
And so working with people that that really are you're kind of moving forward with the same kind of values, but they bring different talents to the table.
Yeah, man. So one of the things that I said on Value After Hours, and I sort of wish I didn't get into this whole return thing, but I also felt like it was necessary because, I don't know, like, man, when you get, it's not big, like, I don't know what the hell I am, but I do know that people are starting to listen to me a little bit more, and like 18,000 followers feels a lot more important than when it was like 500, and I kind of want to let people know who they're following. But I said, like, I'm really not sure, or I've never been less confident that what I did was repeatable, right? And part of why is I've gotten to talk to a lot of people that I really, really respect, like you being one of them. And what I have had exposed, like, you got to look at yourself in the mirror and know who you are, right? And I am similar to you in that really detailed part of the model, or like that part of the filing that maybe I should be picking out. I can get through. I mean, I have a CFA designation. Like, I'm capable of understanding the things, but there are weaknesses that I have, and I need to either hire around that or figure out a way to close that sort of like, I got to figure out a way to mitigate some of those weaknesses, because I think I've proven to myself that I have some strengths, and I'm proud of how I managed through March. But I also know that, like, this is a really tough game, and you got to have the right pieces in place to survive over time.
I think that's something I didn't realize until 2-3 years ago, but I do think you just need to focus on your strengths, and there's no reason that you should be focusing on things that you don't love to do, especially if you have the means to be able to put people around you, or a person or two, or service, or whatever it is that can kind of fill those areas that you don't enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I've tried to do too. It's like I know what I'm good at, and I know where I'm not good at. And and I was talking to who was it the other day? Yen Liao, who's on Twitter. He's amazing. And he's one of the nicest. I love his YouTube videos, and he's he manages, I don't know what he manages, $1 billion maybe now, but I was having a conversation with him, and he's one of the nicest guys you ever talk to. He'll do anything for you, and he's amazing. And same thing with Dennis Hong, who's on Twitter. Cut from the same
Dennis,
ilk.
a good guy.
Just really, really good people. And I've talked to them about it too. But they're also killers. They're savages. They want to win. And they know they're not going to win if it's just them. They want to put great talent around them. They also want to help other people, their friends in their network become better. They understand that. And I think that's something that I need to elevate my game too, and not only filling those voids, but putting the right people around me, people that can encourage me. That, hey, when I launched my fund I was talking to Brent Beshore, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna throw my capital into it and hopefully bring on a couple other people. And he's just like, oh, that's not nearly enough. He's like, you should go up 10x more than that. Like, what? But that's what you want. Toby, I had the same conversation with him. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, you do 10x more than that. It's just, those are the types of people that we all need around us, pushing us to reach our fullest potential. And I'm a big fan of that JP Morgan quote. You go as far as you can see, and when you can get there, you'll be able to see further.
Yeah.
And so I don't know where I'm going to be in 20 years, but I do have a plan for the next 5, and just surround yourself with great people and you'll get there.
Yeah, I think that's right. I like the Tony Robbins. He may have co-opted it, but he says like most people underestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year, and they overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 and 10, right? And it's like the compound growth that you see in the portfolio is also the compound growth that you see in your life if you're on the right treadmill. That said, I pulled up like some like success journal or something that I did years ago, and I'm reading it. I'm like, fuck, I'm the same person. Like,
Well,
did I just write this yesterday?
well, and the other hole you kind of can find yourself in is you look at um, other people and their life, their circumstances, and it's easy to sit back and be like, well, if I had their life and circumstances growing up, I could do that too.
Yeah.
It's like we all like to make excuses for not pushing our own selves, further. And so it's good to get out of that hole as well, just looking at other people and saying, well, they're that way because they they started on second base or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for a long time, I don't know. I guess I was sort of I don't know what it was, man, but I stunted myself in a lot of different ways. I do think a lot of it had to do with what I had to deal with personally. That was like, I mean, I've talked about it, but that's kind of the card that I was dealt. And hopefully I don't deal that to my kids. I'm sure they'll end up on a couch talking about what I did to them, though. It's inevitable. I just tell them that I didn't try to do it.
We're all going to be a life of what's that show on HBO, Succession? I don't know if you've watched that one yet.
Yeah. Yeah, they I think they've got it pretty good though, so we'll see. I tried to take the best of my parents and apply it in my way, but I did something with my wife the other night. I was like so interested in what my kid had to say, and I was legitimately trying to be there as a dad. And then we put him to bed, and she comes out and she's like, "Why were you so hard on him? Like, don't you have any idea of how that must have felt to him?" And I was like, "No, I have no idea. I thought I was being a great father." And she's like, "No, you're being a terrible dad." So then I went in and talked to him, and then we had a good talk. But, it's weird. Like, my brain didn't even connect the two things.
It's interesting as fathers, and I have a 5-year-old girl and a soon-to-be 3-year-old little boy, but it's just the differences even between, how I communicate with my daughter versus my son, even though the son's 2 years older. It's like my daughter's like, "Daddy, can you go get that cookie over there for me?" Like, "Oh, sure, honey." Da, da, da.
Yeah.
My son, he'll like trip and fall and skin his knee. I'll be like, "Boy, get up and figure it out."
That's right. Rub some dirt on it.
You're right, exactly.
That's how we are. I got a 3-year-old, and that kid just like runs us. And I've gotten to the point where I'm just like, this is only because he's the baby. The other ones would have been in their room already. Like, what are we doing? But it is interesting how that birth order does. That stuff's real.
It is. Yeah, I feel it every day. And my wife did the same thing to me too. Like, you're really hard on him. And I was like, "Oh, okay." Just it's good for somebody to tell you that too, because you don't really think about it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I certainly have different skill sets than my wife. So I figured out how to marry different skill sets. Now I need in work to figure out how to have different skill sets around me.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how sometimes the investing and your experiences sort of bleed into personal life too. Like, one area that I'm cognizant with myself is I generally lack empathy, a lot of times. And I think it's just from 20 years of being in this game, of just the type of turnover I'm talking about, the type of diligence that I do. I get to know the CEOs really well. And then also on the other side, knowing that 2 years, I'm probably not going to own you, and you build up those friendships, relationships. It's very cut and dry. Like, it's the part of it I don't like, quite honestly, and the ups and downs as well. And it kind of just turns you into a numb kind of human being, So it's an area that I'm, I can certainly look at myself and see, the areas that I need to do better, and you can see it sometimes translate into family, and just so it's good to know that that's there, so you can make sure to kick yourself back into reality. And that's why we have wives too. That's what they do for us.
That's true. That is true. Do you sometimes will you call a CEO and tell them like, look, I'm exiting. I love what you guys have done. It's just for me the stock is sort of where I'm no longer comfortable, but I really appreciate what you did. Like, is it that kind of a relationship?
I used to not. I used to just let it, and it's tough because you would go from talking to
Oh, you
a
just
s-
ghost them.
yeah, well, exactly. It's sort of obvious because you go from talking to a guy like, every other month to not reaching out anymore. It's sort of obvious what occurred.
Yeah.
And, really in the last 3 or 4 years, I started doing exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I would think
Just like
that's a
reaching
good
out and being like, hey,
practice.
I'm just letting you know, I sold out because of X and Y. And they're very, I mean, it's just a better way to do it. It's a more respectful way. And they, I have 50 CEOs I still talk to this day that don't own their stock anymore, but I still talk to them,
Yeah.
because we've kind of built up a friendship, over the years. And just because I don't own your stock doesn't mean I don't think, they're a great individual.
Yeah, and I would think too it helps you put your mosaic together of like, okay, well, these are sort of the people that I can bounce things off of, right?
Yeah, and I could never be an activist because I've dealt with too many CEOs and know what they go through to know that they're not always to blame when something doesn't go right.
Yeah.
It's like investing's hard, running a business is hard, especially if you're a public company. I would back in this was probably 2007. I built up a big stake into a small company, and they were kind of in the luxury experience area of the market, and going right into that 2008, 2009 time period. And I went to their Christmas party, and there was probably 100 employees there, and then there was family and kids and stuff like that. And this was like 2007, and everybody's having a good time. And I'm just sitting there, and they were giving out awards, and you see their wives, stand up and clap and cheer for their husbands, or vice versa, getting an award, and their kids, sitting there proud, of their parents. And then I went to that same one in 2008, and they really felt it because it was like a luxury experience type company, and they felt the brute force of it early on. And there was like 30 people there, and they were cutting back staff, and
Mm.
the business was down 70%. And I remember walking to the airport because he took me to the airport then, and he's like, Ian, it's like, I don't, and I wasn't a shareholder then the second time, and he's like, I just don't know if we're gonna make it. He's like, and it just sucks because it just sucks when you put forth your best effort and you still fail.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you have I've had probably like 5 or 6 of those types of experiences where I just kind of have I don't know, it's more like a soft spot, for the management teams and what they go through. It's just, it's not always when a company doesn't work out, or a business doesn't perform the way you think, that it's always the management to blame. It's just, this is a tough world we deal in. It's always kind of opportunity, execution, and luck coinciding. That's what we're betting on.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's been part of my hesitation within the microcap space is I think like if you look at a business like Disney, clearly the management talent is very important, and what Iger did to transform that company is extremely important. There's also an element of that company that is like on glide path, right? Like there's a momentum that sort of Disney is big enough that it can carry itself through some problems. Obviously not all, and like I said, there were transformational acquisitions, so I don't want to like belittle that. But in the microcap side, like a luxury experience company that is a microcap, I think is almost by definition somewhat more fragile at the state that you're buying it, right? So
Absolutely.
that would be tough.
It's yeah, absolutely. And um, these are just smaller, more impressionable companies in general. And I think the never sell attitude only works in mid cap or more, because you have a
Yeah.
maturity of a business that can kind of continue on, not regardless of the leader. Leadership's still obviously important for capital allocation, but for the most part, you're not talking about a zero, if things start, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you don't have that luxury down in microcap. And so people always ask about holding period, and it's a tough business. I consider myself more a buy and hold investor than most people in microcap. But if you were to ask me, how many companies have you owned in the last 5 years, and how many of those do you still own today? Well, I might when I did the math on that, I probably owned 35 to 40 companies over the last, 3 or 4 years, and I owned six of them.
Yeah.
So that means that's that churning in that lower half of the portfolio, and it's just a tough business. Like the easiest way to go broke in microcap is to coffee can them,
Huh.
because they're gonna, like I said, 80% of the time if they evolve, it's gonna be in a bad way, so you just need to be watching them.
What I mean, I guess that the issue is that you're betting on execution risk a lot more, right? And in that size. I mean, where do people, I guess maybe you just answered the question, but where do most people go wrong in microcap?
I think probably betting. I know an area that I've gone wrong, and I'm more cognizant now is, and it goes back to my roots of trying to find something first, is like trying to bet on that inflection point, beforehand. I think,
Hmm.
and then just being too early or it never happening.
Yeah.
Trying to capture, and it sounds insane what I'm about to say, but you know, I was so it was like an ego tied to capturing that first 100% move.
Mm-hmm.
But you might have been right 20% of the time and wrong the other 80%. Well, being too early is the same thing as being wrong.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, especially when you're looking at zeros, right? Or
exactly. Yeah,
potential.
yeah, potential zeros. So what I've found is, just and at that point, they're really gambles or speculations. These are still small companies, so why not just wait for them to execute a little bit to show that they can execute, and then make that bet. It's one of the areas too. What in 2000, like maybe 2012, 13, 14, I started focusing on companies that dominate a niche area that are microcap, because that kind of already proved to me that it's a quality management team that either took market share or they created the market. Either way, that shows management competence.
Yeah.
And so I have and today I have kind of an area carved out for sort of those dominant good to great businesses that dominate a niche. And obviously, if they're microcap, it's a small niche.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about the market size, because as you and I both know, you have happy customers, they're going to pull you into other things, and your market's going to expand.
Huh. I mean, that is super interesting. I'm like ruminating on the comment that you said the best way to get ruined is to just coffee can these things. That's really, I don't know how to process that, but that's like a very interesting insight that you dropped.
Well, I had this same debate 2 weeks ago with Tom Gardner, the CEO of the Motley Fool. He had me on, and we were talking about that, because that's kind of what their approach is. You take 30 names or 60 names and you coffee can them, or it's kind of similar to David Gardner. Tom's the CEO and David runs the company with him, and we were going back and forth on that. And I'm not saying you can't uh, do a coffee can approach, but it's very hard. I'll just say it that way. Like, let's put it this
Well,
way.
what are they normally buying though? They're normally buying closer to mid cap, right?
Exactly. But he was
Yeah.
asking me about he was asking about microcap and if you could do kind of their approach into microcap, and that's where the conversation got started. And the way I answered that honestly was, let's look at MicroCapClub. We have 250 of probably some of the smartest microcap investors in the world on there that have profiled 700 companies since 2011. 700. I think we're up to 22 companies that have 10 bagged. So 22 out of 700. That's
Wow.
not a huge hit rate. I think if you were to look down more to that, I think it's maybe 250 or 200 of them have doubled or more since they were profiled. And probably half of them are losers, you know, down 5% or down 100%. I don't know, but 50% of them are losers. So it's a really tough game to say, okay, I'm going to buy these 30 and let power laws take over. Well, because these are small companies, when they stop executing, it's sort of obvious. It's not like a slow play,
Yeah.
and you're kind of stupid for like, well, they're underperforming, I guess I'll still hold it. It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
what I find in microcap is it's pretty obvious when they start to underperform, especially if you know the company really well, and then just move that capital into things that are winning.
The thing that sucks though is then you're selling into an illiquid market, right? So who's the bid?
Some cases, I mean, but again, the other side of this that we haven't even talked about is just knowing your positions better than most other investors.
Yeah.
Continuing to do those types of interviews I was telling you about throughout. A lot of people view due diligence as just an upfront process. That's 10% of it. 90% of the due diligence is maintenance due diligence as you own something.
Mm-hmm.
And so just 75% of my effort every day when I tell Michael Liu, my analyst, is to pay attention to what we own, because what we don't own can't hurt us. So stay
Yeah.
on these things, and when we spot the thesis starting to crack, 9 times out of 10 it is cracking, and we want to sell it before other people.
So is that like monitoring news flow? How are
Yes.
you staying on day to day? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, setting up Google alerts, setting up, if they have larger competitors that are public, making sure you're on their earnings calls, making sure you're seeing what products they're developing that could compete. It's whole line items of things.
Yeah. Do you have that in a checklist, or is it like closer to mental?
We have it broken down. Because it can change for each company.
Yeah.
Because each company's different. But yeah, we kind of have a vague checklist and then get more detailed with it for each company, what exactly those areas are. And it helps us stay on top of these things. And that's where 75% of the effort is.
Yeah, that's what I found with checklist too. It's like there's just each situation is too different to sort of like hammer it into a checklist. But I also do like the idea of just sort of having something that I can go through and say, okay, well, what have I missed in the past, and might it apply here?
Yeah, and you have to have some sort of journaling so you can keep yourself honest with yourself, as well. Because there's still 30%, especially in these small companies, especially if you invest in some that might have different types of optionality on the upside. It's not just one product could work and take the stock up. Maybe they're working on 5 different ones or something you never thought of. It's just being honest with yourself and why a company worked. Still 30% of the time something works for me is usually for something that I didn't even foresee happening.
And
it doesn't
putting yourself in the right pond and it works out.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't do the right research to know that could have happened. And same thing for the downside. I mean, I don't dwell too much on the losers either anymore, just because stuff comes out of left field all the time. I'm not going to act like, oh yeah, well, there was an IP infringement suit, and I guess I should have paid $50,000 for an IP attorney to really dive into that patent, because then I would know it. No, you would never know. So
well, it's cost benefit, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And even if you pay that attorney, he's not going to tell you something's ironclad, because attorneys don't answer anything.
Right. Yep.
Just say, well, exactly. I think it could be this. Thanks, guy. Here's $50,000.
I think when you make that decision, the buy decision, once it kind of check marks all the things you're looking for, what the levers are on that business to watch and continuously watch, but also because these are small companies, also knowing that you're not going to be right all the time. I'm still going to be wrong 40% of the time. Which ones are they going to be? And so, being a stock picker isn't about picking winners. It's about picking out those losers from your portfolio.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to be right. Even when I talk to investors about the fund or whatever, it's like I tell them that, we're going to be wrong, and I want to make sure they're small losses. And that's why I was able to be a full-time private investor for 10 years, before I launched kind of the strategy that I have. It wasn't because of any huge winner, and I had a few of them, but it was mainly because of the losses I never took. And so just keeping track of what those losers are, because you'll see it in your portfolio too. It's like when you look back at your lifetime, you'll probably look back and see, wow, I had 10 huge winners out of the 200 companies that I owned.
Yeah.
For the power of compounding to work, you need interest, time, and something that goes up, and the detractors of that are things that go down.
Yeah, that's right.
So pick out those losers.
Yeah. The biggest lesson, or I guess example of that for me, was the airlines and the banks in March. Like, I mean, it wasn't the easiest thing to bail on those things, especially after being public. But the other side of it's like, well, your capital today is your capital today, and you got to make the best decision today, right? And how I rotated the capital, I mean, if I had held on to those things, I'd still be looking at, I don't know, it's probably close to break even at this point, but using the capital elsewhere was a smart decision. And fundamentally, the thesis cracked. Like, the world stopped. That was not in the underwriting.
Well, the thing I like about how you communicate, not only in your podcast or Toby, is, and I think it's important, is that you're always evolving. I'm evolving. I'm not investing today the same way I invested 5 years ago. It's not the same way I invested 10 years ago. I started investing in story stocks that had no fundamentals. Then I went to precious metals and gold, kind of junior mining companies.
Wow.
Then I went to life sciences. Then I went to GARP. Then I went, and so my strategy today is sort of a culmination of all those things. I still have some story stocks. Ooh, I still have some of those in the portfolio.
Yeah.
And I have a gold miner in there. Oh my goodness, what's that? And I have obviously some small cap, micro cap SaaS names. So it's an eclectic mix that makes up it's sort of a lifetime or 20 years of just investing. And I have little pieces of each one of those experiences that now is a portfolio. It's kind of like a stew. Like to other people, when you look at a stew, you're like, oh yuck, but the pieces you see it put together, it tastes good.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be different for each one of us. So I think, and I fully expect to be evolve in the next 5 years. And it doesn't mean it's some huge way like, well, now I'm going to be a deep value investor. I'm going to do that. It's just on the a lot of times your alpha comes from these small changes you make on the fringes of your psychology when it comes to investing. So just making these little tweaks.
Yeah. Elliot Turner said that one of the things that he really liked about where he was at as an investor is like he knows that his portfolio is one that if anyone else looked at, they would not build it the same way, right? Like, and it's like truly his portfolio. That's a cool place to get to when you're not looking to other people for any type of approval of something or whatever, right? It's like, no, this is me.
Well, and it's the benefit that I think most smaller investors have if you're not managing other people's capital as well. Like you too, Bill. It's like I had somebody ask me that, what's your Sortino? I'm like, go away. It's like you're not getting it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it is very freeing. I wonder if somehow I use it like not having anybody to answer to as a crutch as opposed to not, but at least I think asking that question is probably getting me closer to the right answer than not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So.
and I kind of did it backwards in my career where I became a full-time investor first, and now I'm managing some outside capital. But that's just the way I had to do it, and I feel like not to say I lost my A game prior to this, but I would say now managing other people's capital in the structure that I have with the right investors, which is key, it's brought my A game back to another level in a lot of ways, and that's been really fun.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain amount of pressure that's got to be motivating, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you think are like, just because you see a lot of investors, what do you think are common traits among some of the better microcap investors that you've seen?
It's a good question. I'm just thinking. People are wondering why there's silence.
No, we'll edit the silence out. Not a problem.
I think many of them. I think many of them look through situations through different lenses. They don't invest in a company and see the same things. Like when you have Connor Haley on here eventually, he's really impressive. Like I would say he's one of the top in microcap. And one of the beauties of microcap, Bill, is you do this really well, you're not going to be a microcap investor anymore. And he won't either. And I sent him an email the other day saying, hey, you're going to, I'm not really worried about you too much finding these ideas before me because you're going to be a mid-cap investor soon.
Yeah, that's right.
We joke about it. But, I mean, just talking to somebody like him, you'll see that he's on a different level in how he approaches the investment process, how he evaluates a company, and the people he's putting around him. Kind of what we talked about before. He doesn't feel like he needs to do it all. He's putting the right people around him, and he's just and even as he approaches his fund as a business, it's at another level bigger than what other people that manage a small fund or strategy are thinking about. Like he's thinking bigger all the time, not in a bad way.
No, I read one of his early letters, and he went through like choosing the auditor that he chose and how he set up everything, and it's like clear that he's taking a professional organization really responsible. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's very impressive how he's approached what he's trying to build.
Yeah, there's only a few people that I would probably put money with, and he would be one of them.
Yeah,
that's how much I think of how he approaches investing in the business. And there's a couple other folks that are in MicroCapClub that I think are kind of right there on that kind of same line of sight that just And I love to see when one of the hardest things as an investor to do is to pass on something and then buy it higher when you realize you were wrong and that you should have owned it before. I
Yeah.
just like those little psychological cues that I like to read in letters, investor letters. Like, oh, we started looking at this. I didn't like it then, but yeah, I bought it 100% higher, but it was a story that I understood then, or it evolved into something that I could buy then. Just seeing that they don't have any mental blocks or biases towards previous ideas you looked at. Because I have a list of 700 companies that I did due diligence on that I have in little files, like little blurbs, and I'm constantly kind of looking over them and what's interesting. And I'm not going to not invest in something just because I looked at it before and I missed on the first 500%, because it could still go up another 500%. So you're trying to look for those kind of psychological cues as well.
Yeah. I need to get better at organizing the things that I've looked at in the past. Like even Curate, I was going through my old files and I was like, oh, I wrote this up 2 years ago. I totally, I guess I didn't forget because once I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I did this work. But when I was looking at it at the time, it felt almost novel. And then I realized, oh no, I have done work on this in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really helpful. I mean, and Jim O'Shaughnessy, he preaches it all day long about journaling. And I believe it's the same for your life and for your, journal about your life, but also your investing, obviously, as well. Like what you're thinking when you're making a decision.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's the only way, like you said earlier, to keep yourself honest.
Yeah. Yep.
So what's next for Ian Cassel, man? How big does MicroCapClub get? Like, I mean, you've got a lot of things going on. It's very cool. It's very inspiring for me to see. Because here I'm building whatever the hell this is, and I think it's pretty cool. I don't know where it's going to go, but I don't also know how I'm going to manage the investment side of the equation because this takes up a lot of time.
Well, and I think just like everything, you're always investing ahead, and so if you're looking at it from a bottom line perspective, you're never going to reach your full potential. You got to always be investing in the a person or technology or whatever to get to that next level. So it's that constant battle that you're having, kind of entrepreneurial battle that everybody has. But for me, yeah, I mean, I don't know how big MicroCapClub can get. I mean, it's getting bigger now because we're kind of in this same momentum machine that the market's in right now. Like we're having record numbers of people sign up every month, but it's also, I don't know about the quality level of the people that are signing up,
Yeah.
because they're looking for the next thing that can go up 200% in a day, not necessarily about becoming a better investor,
You could SPAC it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. But it's an incredible resource for my own investing still to this day, which is what makes it fun. I want to see what the smartest people are liking and why, and I want to look at all the ideas, and the cool thing that's happened over the last 3 years where, those applications I was telling you about with people writing ideas and the ideas that are even posted in the club, they were 99% North American ideas 2 years ago, and today it's probably 50-50. So you're getting a lot of Australian, a lot of European microcaps, you're getting that, and that excites me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and so it helps me as an investor. I kind of get the catbird seat of seeing what those new ideas are and also seeing who the best investors are, networking with them, forming relationships with them to see idea flow. That's a huge asset kind of not only for me, but obviously the people that are part of it too. So
yeah, man, I gotta think that's cool. That's a cool contribution to leave to investing whenever, like whatever you want to do with it. It's cool that you got it started and it's got momentum.
Yeah, I mean, from a business standpoint, like I don't know if it can double from here or not, just because there's always the reason why it's such a unique and great club is because it's not a recommendation engine. It's not here's buy these 10 stocks. It takes work, so if somebody pays money, they go in, they just give me the names to buy, give me the names to sell.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit overwhelming. So we have quite a bit of churn on the subscriber side. So when you ask me, like, as a business, I don't know how much bigger it will get.
Well,
I
don't
imagine
even
it will
mean
get
that.
bigger. But
I mean quality, like where do maybe it's somewhere that is sort of like Vic. It is like Vic, but I just sort of didn't know what your vision of it was.
Yeah, I think it's just continuing to do what it's doing. It's going in the right direction. There's other things that I'd like to do that I'm that I'd like to work on, like maybe doing some more educational type content, because we have a lot of folks that are just kind of new to microcap. They might have investing experience, but new to microcap, and just kind of creating maybe some videos or tutorials on how to just research a stock,
Yeah.
stuff like that. That could really help the new person in this space. So that's probably an area that I'd want to get in more. But then so that's MicroCapClub. Then on like the investment management side, just continuing to do what I'm doing on that side, and I think the way that scales in an unscalable strategy, which is microcap, is, you probably in 5 years just have a little bit of a deeper bench, like if I'm successful as a microcap investor, and if I'm in a dozen names, and there's going to be some turnover there, but I would hope in 5 years that 3 or 4 of those microcaps are small caps.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sell them just because they grew out of the narrative that I have that I'm a microcap investor.
Yeah.
And so, it probably expands from, 15 or 12 to 15, 16 names, and we probably have some $1 billion, $2 billion market caps alongside some $50 million ones. So it's a little bit of a deeper bench with some rookies and veterans, but generally investing the same way, because I always want to be able to look at something that's 50 million and be able to put that in the portfolio.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I talked to one of your LPs, and he is a very good guy, and I think he understands it. So I think you pick your LPs well. I commend you on that.
That's probably the biggest part of the process, is scaring the wrong people away. No, honestly, it is. It's not. Listen, I mean, everybody knows that I have a following on Twitter or whatever, and I have that luxury, that there's people that do reach out, but I need to be able to make decisions like a single human being making a decision, not getting pulled into people that don't understand our mission and how we do things, and so, the first thing I try to do when I talk to somebody that might not even understand microcap is just scaring them, be like, hey, we're down 30%, if the market's down 30 this year, we're going to be down 45.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that? If you're not, this isn't for you, and then also being real with them. And this is kind of a benefit to me, is like, I'm not after everybody's money. It's like, I'm looking for a small fraction of your investable portfolio, and I want it to be a small fraction because it's the right allocation, quite honestly. And also it's an allocation where you can do the right thing at the right time and not feel the volatility, and so when that dip happens, you can invest more because you have that extra capital to do so, and you don't feel the volatility that's inherent, in this portfolio, because everybody's objective should be to outperform it, which means buying those February, Marches of 2020s.
Yeah. So how do you deal with it? Like, because you're fully allocated to it.
Yes. I don't know.
Because you're an emotional psychopath, and it doesn't
it's like
bother
I told you. I can't cry with my kids now. So.
I've actually been thinking about that comment since you said it, because that's just not what I think of you as. My mental association with you, and it's probably because of the value after hours jokes, but is that you're like a really jovial, happy person. So to hear you say that you lack empathy at times is sort of shocking for me to hear.
I can always laugh. It's the other side.
Yeah, okay, well, that's fair. Yeah. You've repressed that.
Right, yeah, exactly. I've repressed that pain through the years.
Yeah.
I should be on the psychologist's couch too, I guess. But this is all I've ever done, and when I started out, I was in 3 or 4 companies at a time. I have my entire net worth for the first 10 years. That's how I built the capital from whatever it was into an amount that I could just cut the cord. And so I've always been used to that volatility in that portfolio. Even I woke up one morning and all of a sudden a stock I owned was halted. It was a 30% position because the auditor couldn't find the cash on the balance sheet.
Oh no.
When it reopened a couple days later, I was down 40% on it. And I sold out of the position all in a day. Luckily there was liquidity to do so. And that stock would ultimately go to zero in about 3 months. And it sucked, but just going through kind of those reps, good and bad. Like I've seen the extreme of the upside and the extreme of the downside. I don't have issues with volatility just now. I don't like to take losses, and I stay away from big losses. That's probably the biggest one I ever took. But I don't know. Just the amount of reps, I'm just used to it. To answer your question, I don't have a good answer for it.
No, that makes sense. Did you know the CEO of that one as well as you thought you did?
I did. the learning lesson from that one wasn't even about kind of the financials. It was, I just never really bought into the product. I kind of bought into their fundamentals. You
Huh.
know, it was, oh, this is growing 20% with no debt, trading at 12 times earnings. I'll just buy it, And I talked to them, it seemed good. The product looked okay. I didn't really understand why anybody would buy it, but maybe
Yeah.
because nobody was, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was, and
That's
kind
a
of how
really
I
good
pivoted.
lesson.
The learning lesson from there was, and really to this day, I really need to have complete buy-in to the management team, the product service, the mission, everything of that company. And it's very qualitative and touchy-feely what I just explained, but it's also the only way that I can hold something for the long term,
Yeah.
unless I
No,
have
that
that
makes sense, man.
complete buy-in into it. And when you're kind of investing on fundamentals or purely on the fundamentals of a business, you're always just investing for the next set of numbers.
Yeah.
And God forbid they come in 2% less of what you thought, then you're going to sell it, and you're never going to be able to win her that way either, because even Southwest Airlines or all these companies, they all stub their toe at some point.
Yep.
You need to be able to live through that with them if you want to hold these things over the long term.
Yeah, I think that a question that I try to ask a fair amount, and one that I ponder a lot, is, there there's the thought from Bezos, with the customer, be customer obsessed. As an investor, I think I am beginning to become much more customer obsessed on who is the ultimate customer of this business, right? And like, why are they fundamentally buying it, rather than sort of, I don't know, in the past, I probably didn't do a good enough job getting inside that person's psyche. And, that's where I'm going to spend a lot more time. I think
Yeah.
I've been reasonably good over the last 18 months or so, but back when I, I don't know, I came in like through the value framework, and I don't know, I focused way too much on statistical stuff and whether or not something was cheap, and I just didn't do enough of the business analysis. My results have gotten good since I've cared much more about the business. And, maybe that's a late cycle comment, and so is everybody's, and who cares anymore? But I think there's more reality to that statement than just a function of where we are in the market.
What's your goal as an investor?
I don't know, man. I want to be able to look myself in the mirror and be proud of what I have done. Like the curate idea, I'm really proud of, because I think that was like, I was right for the right reasons, and that means a lot to me. I guess that the thing that I want to be able to do is look at some of the guys on Twitter that I really, look up to and admire, and know that I belong in the same room as they do. My fear right now is I'm going to lean pretty heavy into this podcast stuff, and I have been, so the portfolio is somewhat neglected. But, I think that that's probably the right decision for today, and I think my portfolio is okay. I'm not like, I'm not looking at alt data and rapidly trading out of these positions. So if it can't run itself for 6 months, right, then like I probably have not built it correctly. So, I don't know. It's not a great answer, but it's the answer I can give. I just want to provide for my family and know that, when I look at my wife and I say, hey, I know what I'm doing, that I'm actually living up to the responsibility that she's entrusted for me. I don't really want to run outside capital. That's not the goal. If I had to, then I would, but for now I don't. And part of the reason, man, is what you said earlier about like not knowing that I've been tested yet. March was scary, but I don't know that was like really a test. I still doubt whether or not that was the test that I need to be able to look somebody that's worked their whole life, to scrape by and save, to say like, I can invest your capital. I don't know that I'm there yet. And I don't think that that's one of those things that, given where my life is, I'm comfortable faking until I make. I mean, I want to know when I tell somebody that I mean it.
That's a good answer. I mean, I think the goal of investing is to hold on to your winners as long as you can. And I think if you focus on your podcast and you're in things like Curate, that what those business levers are that you need to pay attention to. You don't need to pay attention to them and have your eye on them every single second of the day, you know. Um, but you know them well, you know, and if your goal is to hold something like that as long as they execute and perform, you know, you just have to have that mentality. And sometimes giving the positions a little slack is what it takes, you know, to hold them. You know, you can't just
Yeah.
be focused on them so much where you're you know, the butterfly effect, you know.
Yeah.
You can't have that either. So, you know, I think the podcast for you and maybe some of the other things you're working on is a good distraction that could almost help your investing. I get asked all the time from people, am I ready to be a private full-time investor and this or that? And I'm like, you don't need to be. You know, just find a job you like to do that gives you autonomy, and it might even pay you less. But you know, you don't have to do this every day, all day. You know, in fact, I
Yeah.
would say in some ways, given whatever your strategy would be, it could hurt you.
Yeah, I think that's right. I do think that sometimes that thought gets marketed as like, oh, well, just don't do anything and see what happens and everything will be okay. And that's not at all what I'm saying, right? It's just, I think that for me right now, I don't know how long I'm going to have people's ears. And it seems as though people really are enjoying like what I'm doing. And so am I. So in the middle of like some great content grab, when I have some ability to do this well, like it would be really stupid not to lean into it. And, you know, if it fizzles out, it fizzles out and whatever. But I'm hopeful that it won't. And so far, the trends are good. And like you said, I don't think that I need to be in front of my portfolio all the time. I don't even think I can win that game. Like, you know, there guys on Twitter are crazy smart, you know, and like they're all, it's not just on Twitter, right? Like in real life at the hedge funds, like I can't beat them at that game. I know that.
Well, in the area that you invest too, I mean, if you're finding things that, it's kind of like what I said before, it's like to hold these things, you're gonna have to hold something that is cheap, expensive, loved, hated. Um, your friends are gonna be screaming at you to sell it, to buy it, you know, and you got to invest through that. And that means you have to have an independent mindset towards what you're evaluating in that business. But the other side of it is you can't be, you know, gripping that tube of toothpaste too tight.
Yeah.
So, I agree too. It's like, I think there's you reach these inflection points in life too, where you know you need to lean into it, and you know
Yeah.
yours is the podcast, and people enjoy hearing you talk about investing or your life, or hearing about some of the issues you dealt with your dad, and they don't want to hear somebody that's perfect. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, I am not that.
well, no, I mean, and you articulate things really, really well, and you know, it's like we impress people with, you know, our accomplishments, but you really do just connect with people through their struggles, because everybody hearing you talk about your dad probably is going through something similar with their life, you know, and that's where you connected with people, not people thinking that you got a 45% return last year in one of your accounts. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great, but people are listening to you because of you being a real person.
Yeah. The 45% is not correct for people that are not
Sorry.
familiar. That's okay.
I wasn't
just don't
referring
want
to
to
Bill with
misstate
that.
my returns.
We'll edit that out of this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thing about like talking about my dad that was interesting is, you know, one, he's one of the guys that like I learned a lot, you know, like I love my father big time. But like that was a really tough moment in my life. I was in law school. I had cited when I was 28. That was like back when or after when I did the work or whatever. I guess I was 25 when that happened. And by the work, I mean therapy. But you know, it's sort of hard to like put your dad on blast a little bit in that way. But the other side of it is I really want, like, I don't want this podcast to be something that people feel like they have to come on and like emote, right? Like that's not the goal here. But I also do want people to say like, you know what, this is sort of a place that it's okay to acknowledge that stuff's not always great, right? Or that there are tough parts in life. And I sort of want to show some of the like life behind investors if they're willing to share it. And if they aren't, then we'll just do an investing conversation. Like, I don't really care. And then eventually I'd sort of like to take it outside of investing and just do interviews because I really enjoy this stuff. I think it's super fun.
I think you have the right temperament. You're a person that people want to talk more with. That's why, we're bumping over 2 hours or around 2 hour mark, and I don't feel like, boy, I got to go do something else. It's an
Yeah.
enjoyable conversation. So I think you have a great temperament and cadence.
You're an enjoyable guy to talk to, so it
thank
helps.
You.
I mean it, even if you have no empathy.
But thank you. Just a killer.
That's what I'm going to title the episode. Ian Cassel, straight killer.
Yeah. Just all up into the right arrows. Get on my way.
That's right. Rocket ships and diamond hands. Ian Cassel's coming.
No, but I mean, we're all going through life, and it's not all good stuff. So I think you're right. We had, so when what would that have been? That would have been back in like 2012. So I was sitting down with my wife. It was before we had kids, but I got a call, and it was my dad, and my mom got hit by a car. It was a freak accident. Like, she was late at night. She walked across the road, and there was kind of a bend in the road, and a car struck her and dead instantly.
Oh no!
And that occurred almost 1 year to the day. This is all around Christmas time. 1 year to the day after my mother-in-law died from cancer.
Oh.
So back-to-back Christmases, basically. It was like 3 days before. We lost my wife's mom and then my mom, and it was just like, after that, you're like, all right, what's next Christmas gonna get? So
yeah.
we all go through, and that compared to what other people go through is nothing. But I'm just saying, everybody's going through some type of struggle, and I think it's in those ways that we're human, that you really connect and see how people dealt with it.
Well, dude, people would look at my grandma's life and be like, she's had everything her whole life. Like, what does she ever have to worry about? She lost both of her parents before she was 25, and she's buried 2 kids. One of them, is like a really unfortunate story of sort of a wasted life. The other got his stuff together for the most part and was working on a car. He used to build like old hot rods and stuff. Car started to roll down a hill, and there was a part of the chassis that like sort of almost formed a hook. Hooked his blue jeans, dragged him down a hill, pinned him against a tree, and killed him. Like that. So, could you imagine getting that phone call? It's your son. Like, fuck that. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't trade anything for that. So, you know what I mean? Like, or you couldn't give me enough to like make that trade, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't know. It's just sometimes I guess one of the things that I felt like was a little bit of an avenue that I could explore, not being constrained by sort of like a firm behind me or a fund or whatever, is, whatever you can sort of delve into in that realm. Because I think a lot of podcasts are, hey, isn't this great? And this is my best idea and I'm crushing it. And it's all like, I think some of the consumption almost feels like you're listening to a marketing machine. And I'm trying to more like have people listen to a conversation. And I happen to think investors are like crazy interesting, because if you're good at investing, I think you have to be curious, and a curious mind is an interesting mind.
Absolutely. And I think that should be everybody's goal. Just put interesting people around them,
Yeah. It's been cool, man. You know how cool it is for somebody like me to be able to call you and be like, hey, do you want to hop on a podcast and be able to have a conversation? It's awesome.
No, this is a blast. This is unlike any other interview I did, just because it feels like more of a conversation.
Yeah.
It's less of me pitching whatever I'm here to pitch, whether that's microcap space or whatever. But I've loved it. I think you're gonna. I think you're gonna crush it. You have so many skills, and a lot of them, you're trying to figure it out. But you're highly talented, and I'm excited about seeing where you're at in 5 years.
I'll tell you what, man, I got to get my sound right. I've had like sound issues and stuff. I need a hardware backup. I mean, it's time to make this thing like a little bit more professionalized instead of just like, oh, here's a podcast. I hope you guys like it. So
back alley, calling in on a conference line and recording.
That's right. Like I didn't have a website. Like John Mihalkovich from Manual of Ideas basically was like, okay, Bill, I will build your website. Just like give me the shit that I need. So the only reason that there's a functioning website is because John did it. But I'm the type of person that sort of needs that nudge. So now I'm going to like hire somebody to do it the right way. And to your point on like surrounding yourself with the right people, I'm not going to be able to read what I need to like satisfy myself as an investor and do the podcast and build out a website and have a marketing arm. Like I got to have people around me to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's actually been kind of a fun learning experience from that perspective, right? Like, because I care so much about it, but in order to see it grow, I need to let go of some of it. And that's kind of interesting.
Well, we all go through stages like that. Like you don't want to look back in 5 years and think, oh, if I would have just focused on that, it would have been, 10 times bigger. It could have been something huge. You just don't want to do that. And I think we all reach things or areas like that where we have to make that inflection point. You don't want to keep on spreading yourself too thin where you're doing everything okay. You gotta focus on something so you can crush it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like, you mentioned guys like Dennis Hong and like Fred Liu and my man Dan McMurtry and Francisco. Like these are guys that, I think I am competent. Okay. I don't think that I can beat them at their game. So it's not about me beating them at their game, right? Some of it is about like acknowledging what makes people great and helping them be elevated. I love what you do, man. I like your marketing. I like how you built MicroCapClub. I like how you focused on microcap. So like, why not talk to you, elevate you, who is someone that I respect, and, build something for myself in the process. And that's kind of how I'm viewing this whole thing. And it all goes back to wealth games versus status games. Like, I just don't care who gets the credit. I just want to put out like dope stuff that people want to listen to. And it's been fun.
Well, you're doing it. Continue to do it.
Well, I appreciate you stopping by to help me do it. And I am going to let you go take care of your kids because I know that your wife is saying they're about to run out of the basement. Are you just like covered in snow right now?
Yeah, it's snowing outside right now. Get another 6 inches today.
Dude, I do not miss that.
Don't
I was at the
Chicago?
Beach on Sunday.
Yeah, come on.
No, so my wife was really sick, and I had the kids, and I took them to the beach, and I looked at it, and I was like, I do not miss. I mean, I love my neighbors. I love that city. I can't wait to visit in the summer. I'm gonna rage there. But I don't need to be there in the winter, man. I'm done with that.
No, I don't blame you. We went down to Florida for a couple of weeks too, and just being able to kick the kids outside and go to the beach is just killer.
Yeah.
The older I get, the less I like the seasons, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I can understand that. I'll tell you what, we got some space, so if you need somewhere to come back to, hit me up and we can host you.
Done. I'll do that.
All right, man. Well, take care of yourself and tell your wife thank you for letting you stay for this long. I appreciate it.
I will. Thank you. Thanks
Ian
for having
Cassel,
me on.
ladies and gentlemen. Follow him. How can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter. My handle is Ian Cassel, IANCASSEL, or you can go to MicroCapClub.com to check out MicroCapClub. You can go to if.capital to see the capital management arm.
All right, or you can sign on to Value After Hours Live and see how he's commenting under a bunch of different aliases.
Truth.
All right, man. Take care of yourself. Thank you.